I checked the pressure readings for the fourth time in an hour, my eyes scanning the displays of the command pod. 11,000 feet below the surface, every decimal point mattered. The ocean pressed against the reinforced hull of Abyssal Miner 6, our home for the past 3 months. Through the viewports, there was only darkness beyond our lights, a darkness that held more wealth than most nations. Drone 7's mass calibration is off by 0.3%, Dana called from her station to my right. Her fingers moved across her console with practiced efficiency, not even looking down as she adjusted parameters. The harvester claws pulling slightly to port side. Run diagnostics, but keep it operational for now, I said, then pointed to the topographical map on the main screen. I want you to focus on 8 and 12. They're working that ridge system we mapped last week. Dana nodded, her auburn hair catching the blue light from her console. On it, Stephen. The 17 harvester drones were our key to making money. Each unit searched the seabed for polymetallic nodules, potato-sized lumps rich in copper, nickel, manganese, and rare earth metals. What we pulled up in a good month was worth billions. Eugene swiveled in his chair, removing his glasses to clean them on his lab coat. Yesterday's mineral scans from that sector were exceptional. The ridge system is practically covered in high-grade nodules with 28% higher metal content than our typical harvest areas. I nodded, allowing myself a small smile. Our corporate overlords would be pleased with those numbers, which meant bonuses for the crew. Good. Keep the drones focused there. Jack approached from the pressure lock corridor, tablet in hand. All pressure locks are secure, Chief. Hourly checks completed and logged. His stocky frame moved with careful precision, the way most of us did after months in the confined space of the habitat. Thanks, Jack. Any issues with the East Wing seals? None. Holding steady at optimal pressure. He tapped something on his tablet before returning to his monitoring station. From across the command pod, Kenny and Molly waved to get my attention. Emergency ballast systems are prepped and ready, Kenny reported, his salt and pepper hair visible above his station's displays. Molly and I ran a full diagnostic. Systems are green across the board. Molly gave a thumbs up. Calibrated the emergency discharge ports too, just in case. I acknowledged them with a nod and turned back to the main monitoring wall. 17 video feeds arranged in a grid, each showing the murky view from a different drone as they methodically harvested the ocean floor. The rhythm of the operation was hypnotic. Locate nodule, extend claw, extract, store, move to next target. I stretched in my chair, feeling the tension in my shoulders from another 12-hour shift. The pressure of command wore on me, even when operations ran smoothly. I rolled my neck, hearing the pop of air bubbles in my joints. Chief, Jeffrey called out sharply from the communication station, his dreadlocks swaying as he adjusted his headset. I'm picking up unusual seismic activity approximately 2 miles east of our position. I straightened immediately. Put it on the main screen. Jeffrey's fingers danced across his console, and the central display changed to show a scrolling seismograph. The readout showed distinct spikes moving in a pattern I'd never seen before. Could be volcanic activity, Kathleen suggested, stepping closer to examine the data, her blonde ponytail swinging behind her. We knew this area had some geothermal features. I shook my head as I watched the readings. Volcanic tremors don't move that quickly. Look at the progression. It's traveling at what, 3 knots? 3.2, Jeffrey confirmed, frowning at his readings. Volcanic activity doesn't move like that, I said, leaning forward in my chair. Dana, pull the drones back from the eastern quadrant as a precaution. Already on it, she replied, fingers flying across her touch controls. The command pod fell silent as everyone watched the strange readings on our sensors. I felt the tightening in my chest that came with surprises 11,000 feet underwater. Down here, surprises were rarely good. Drone 8's feed is... Dana started, then stopped abruptly as the video from Drone 8 tilted wildly, sending the harvester arm swinging through the camera's field of view. I focused on the feed, narrowing my eyes. Just beyond the reach of the drone's lights, something moved, something massive. A shadow darker than the surrounding water, slipping just at the edge of visibility. All drones pull back. Now, I ordered, my voice cutting through the sudden tension in the command pod. Full retreat to home position. Pulling back all units, Dana confirmed, her voice steady despite the concern etched on her face. I reached for the master control panel, flipping the switch for the habitat's external floodlights. Let's light it up out there. I want to see what we're dealing with. The xenon arrays on Abyssal Miner 6 lit up, illuminating the deep ocean. The monitors displaying our external camera feeds brightened, showing the desolate landscape of the abyssal plain. And there it was, where Drone 8 had been moments before. A massive form circled in the water. At first, I thought it was a submarine, but it was alive. A fish, but unlike any I'd seen in my 15 years of deep-sea operations. At least 40 feet long, with armor plating instead of scales, it moved with a predatory grace. Its head was covered in bone plates, with huge eyes fixed on our drone as it retreated. I felt my blood run cold as the creature turned toward our habitat, its massive tail propelling it with surprising speed as it began to investigate the source of the light. I stared at the monitor. My breath caught in my throat as the massive creature circled our drone. Its armored head gleamed under our external lights, bone plates shifting as it moved with surprising agility for something so large. The command pod had gone completely silent around me. Stephen. Dana's voice broke through the quiet, her eyes fixed on the same screen. Is that what I think it is? Before I could answer, Tucker Shepard leaned forward from his station, adjusting his glasses with one hand while pointing at the screen with the other. It's a Dunkleosteus, he said, his voice carrying the quiet awe of a scientist confronted with the impossible. A predator that's been extinct for 360 million years. I didn't waste time questioning how something extinct could be circling our drone. Instead, I reached for the emergency protocols panel on my console. Activating emergency protocol alpha, I announced, my fingers dancing across the controls. Dana, recall all drones immediately. Get them back to the habitat. Already on it, she replied, her hands working quickly across her station. On screen, the creature suddenly changed direction, shooting toward Drone 12 with startling speed. Its massive jaws opened wide, bone plates slamming together with such force that they sliced clean through the titanium harvester arm as if it were made of paper. The severed arm tumbled toward the ocean floor as our drone spun wildly from the impact. Alarms blared throughout the command center, red warning lights flashing across every console. Jack rushed to his monitoring station, checking structural readouts while Kenny and Molly secured their systems. Everyone secure your stations, I ordered, keeping my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Jeffrey, make sure all systems are locked down. I turned to Tucker, who was transfixed by the creature on the screen. What exactly are we facing here? Tell me everything you know about this thing. Tucker took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving the monitor. The Dunkleosteus was the apex predator of its time, nearly 40 feet long at full growth, with a bite force that would rival industrial shears. Those bony plates you see aren't teeth. They're self-sharpening jaw edges that could cut through anything in the ancient oceans. As he spoke, the creature moved with purpose toward another of our drones. On screen, we watched it systematically destroy 3 more units, its movements becoming more agitated with each attack. "It seems to be provoked by their movements," Eugene suggested from behind me, his voice tight with tension. "Or their lights," Kathleen added. "Deep-sea creatures often react to unexpected light sources." I watched our remaining drones retreating toward the habitat per Dana's commands when a terrible realization struck me. "They're coming straight back to us," I said, my stomach dropping. "We're leading it right to our location." Dana's head snapped up from her console, her face pale in the glow of emergency lights. "Stephen, the predator is following them back," she shouted, pointing to a secondary screen showing the creature's heat signature trailing behind our retreating drones. I had seconds to make a decision. If that thing reached our habitat with the same aggressive intent it had shown toward our drones, we'd be in serious trouble. Our external structure wasn't designed to withstand attacks from a 40-foot prehistoric monster with industrial-strength jaws. "Shut down all external lights," I ordered, my voice cutting through the alarm noise. "Power down all remaining drones immediately. Everything dark now." Dana's fingers flew across her console, and one by one, our screens went black as the drones powered down. Jeffrey hit the master control for the external lighting arrays, plunging the area around our habitat into complete darkness. I silenced the alarms with a quick command, leaving us in the dim glow of the command center's emergency lighting. "Everyone stay quiet," I whispered, though there was no logical reason the creature would hear us through the habitat's walls. Old instincts die hard. We waited in tense silence. Seconds stretched into minutes as we stared at blank screens, nobody daring to move or speak. Kenny's breathing sounded unnaturally loud in the quiet. Eugene nervously cleaned his glasses for the third time. I could hear Molly's fingers tapping silently against her leg, a nervous habit I'd noticed during previous crisis situations. The only sound was the soft hum of the habitat's life support systems as we waited, hoping the prehistoric hunter would lose interest and leave us alone in the darkness of the deep. The habitat shuddered violently beneath my feet. I grabbed the edge of my console to steady myself as the eastern module took a direct hit from the Dunkleosteus. Warning indicators flashed across my screen, competing with the low groan of metal under stress. The impact had been precise, targeted. "Structural integrity, holding at 93%, Jack called out, his fingers flying across his monitoring station. His voice remained steady, but the tension in his shoulders told me everything I needed to know. I nodded, about to respond when another collision struck. Stronger this time. The overhead lights flickered ominously, plunging us into momentary darkness before the backup systems kicked in. Several crew members gasped. When the lights stabilized, I found Dana staring at me with wide eyes from her station. "It's testing us," I said. "Methodical strikes, different points of impact." I watched the camera feed, tracking the massive armored shape as it circled back. This isn't random aggression. It's examining us like prey, looking for weakness. The creature disappeared from view for several seconds. The command center fell silent, except for the steady ping of the sonar. Everyone seemed to hold their breath. Then came another impact, this time directly against the main connecting tunnel between modules. The entire habitat shifted several inches. Red warning lights flashed on my console. The tunnel was our weakest link, a reinforced tube connecting the command module to the living quarters and research stations. If it failed, we would lose access to half our habitat and risk catastrophic decompression. "We need to do something," Dana said, her voice tight with controlled fear. "Can we move? Some kind of evasive maneuver?" I shook my head. "We're not in a submarine, Dana. We're a fixed mining habitat. The most we can do is adjust our position by a few feet, using the stabilizing thrusters." Fern White stepped forward from the medical station, her eyes focused on the external camera feeds. What about the manipulator arms? We could use them to drive it away. I looked at the control panel for our external equipment. The mining habitat had 4 robotic arms designed for handling equipment and samples outside the pressurized environment. They weren't weapons, but they might provide some defense. Good thinking, I said, already activating the system. Jack, what's our visual on the creature? Switching to night vision on cameras 3 and 4, Jack replied, tapping commands into his console. The screens lit up with a green glow. The Dunkleosteus appeared, its armored head and strong jaw plates visible as it circled back toward us. I took control of the manipulator arms and extended 2 toward the approaching creature. As the Dunkleosteus closed in, I swung the first arm in an arc, attempting to create a barrier between the predator and our habitat. The creature barely slowed. It brushed past the steel appendage like it was nothing more than a minor annoyance. When I tried to push it away with the second arm, the Dunkleosteus turned sharply, catching the manipulator in its powerful jaws. Metal crumpled under the immense pressure. Alarms blared as the arm's hydraulic system failed completely. Jesus, someone whispered behind me. Tucker stepped closer to the screen, adjusting his glasses as he studied the creature. Its armor is impenetrable. Those plates evolved to withstand tremendous pressure and impacts. Our equipment isn't designed to compete with that kind of natural defense. Before anyone could respond, the Dunkleosteus slammed into the connecting tunnel again. The impact was more forceful than before, as if the creature had learned from its previous attempts. Emergency sirens joined the already blaring alarms, creating a cacophony of warning sounds. "Structural integrity down to 87%, Jack shouted over the noise. "If we take a few more hits like that, we'll have a breach. The tunnel wasn't built to withstand this kind of targeted assault." I silenced the alarms with a quick command, leaving only the essential warning indicators active. The sudden drop in noise level seemed to sharpen everyone's focus. "It's fixated on the connecting tunnel," I said, watching the creature circling back toward that same vulnerable point. "It's identified our weakest spot." On the monitor, the Dunkleosteus hovered just outside camera range, its massive form barely visible in the water. It would retreat, circle, then charge the same section of the tunnel. Each impact was more precise and damaging. The creature was learning, adapting its attack strategy. Jack looked up from his station, his expression grave. "At this rate of structural degradation, we've got maybe 3 or 4 more hits before we lose integrity." I gripped the edge of my console as I watched the predator approach. My mind raced through our options. The manipulator arms had failed. We couldn't move the habitat. Our reinforced hull, built to withstand the deep ocean's pressure, was being damaged by a creature that evolution had perfected long before humans existed. The Dunkleosteus disappeared from view again, preparing for another attack run. We needed a plan, and we needed it now, before the ancient predator succeeded in breaking through. The ballast system. Jack's words from earlier suddenly cut through the chaos in my mind like a beacon through fog. The emergency ballast system he'd mentioned during his report. It could be our answer. The habitat swayed from another impact as the realization took hold. I turned to Dana, who was white-knuckling her console as another tremor subsided. Her face was tense in the red glow of the emergency lights. "The discharge ports for the emergency ballast system. Where are they located?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Dana blinked, her mind working through the technical schematics she knew by heart. "There's one at the junction of the main tunnel, right where that thing keeps hitting us." Her eyes widened as she made the connection to what I might be thinking. I pivoted toward Tucker, who was studying the creature's movements on the monitor. The dim emergency lighting cast shadows across his weathered face as he leaned forward, transfixed by the ancient predator. "Tucker, what about vulnerable areas on this thing? Anything we can target?" Tucker adjusted his glasses, his scientific mind clearly racing despite our dire situation. The armor plating mainly covers the head and front portions, evolutionary protection for head-on attacks. But the mouth and gill areas would be considerably softer. That's typical of most armored fish species, extinct or otherwise. A plan crystallized in my mind instantly. We couldn't outrun it. We couldn't fight it directly. But we might be able to use its own hunting behavior against it. "I need manual control of the emergency discharge system," I said, my fingers already moving across my console to access the subsystems. "Can you reroute it to my station?" Dana's hands flew across her controls. "Accessing emergency protocols now. Rerouting discharge control to your console." She paused, realization dawning on her face. "You're going to wait until it opens its mouth for another attack, aren't you? Blast it when it's vulnerable." I nodded, not taking my eyes off the controls. "Exactly. The mining slurry is abrasive and toxic. It should be enough to drive it away if we can get it into those sensitive areas." The habitat suddenly lurched violently to one side. Equipment crashed to the floor around us. A support beam groaned overhead. "Structural integrity down to 78%, Jack shouted from his station, his voice tight with tension. "A few more hits like that, and we're looking at catastrophic failure." My fingers raced across the console, navigating through emergency protocols and system overrides. The interface felt cold under my touch as I accessed the discharge controls, mentally calculating timing and pressure release. Every second counted now. On the main screen, I watched the massive Dunkleosteus positioning itself directly in front of our connecting tunnel again. Its movements were purposeful, almost calculating. The enormous armored head turned slightly, aligning for another powerful strike. But this time, I noticed its massive jaw plates beginning to separate. The creature wasn't just ramming us, it was preparing to bite through the tunnel. The horrific reality of what we were facing hit me full force. Those prehistoric jaws could shear through metal and composite materials with ease. If it managed to get a proper bite on our connecting tunnel, we wouldn't stand a chance. I watched as the jaw plates opened wider, revealing rows of razor-sharp bony ridges that had evolved to slice through the hardest shells of ancient seas. The targeting system on my console showed the discharge port was perfectly aligned with the creature's approach. Without hesitation, I slammed my hand down on the discharge activation. The habitat shuddered as the high-pressure system engaged, expelling a cloud of dark metallic slurry directly into the creature's exposed mouth and gill areas. I watched as the Dunkleosteus convulsed on the monitor. The mining slurry choked its respiratory system, just as I had hoped. Its armored body writhed in pain, tail thrashing violently against our habitat's outer shell. Each impact shook the structure, creating a harsh scraping sound that echoed in the command center. "Hold on," I said, gripping my console as the habitat shuddered again. The creature slammed against our structure again, its movements growing more erratic. The noise of its armored plates scraping along the metal was unlike anything I had heard in 15 years of deep-sea operations. It vibrated through my hands and into my bones. Then, after what felt like minutes but was likely only seconds, the massive prehistoric predator turned away from us. Its huge plated body rotated awkwardly, almost drunkenly, before it powered forward with several strong thrusts of its tail. The camera tracked it as it disappeared into the absolute blackness beyond our lights. Trailing clouds of dark slurry mixed with what looked like a darker substance that could only be blood. The command center fell into sudden silence, broken only by the gradually quieting alarms that had been blaring since our first impact. I reached over and silenced them completely, leaving us in an almost eerie quiet. The only sounds now were the soft hums of equipment and the stressed breathing of my crew. Eugene was the first to speak, his voice uncharacteristically small in the quiet room. "Did we kill it?" Tucker shook his head. "I doubt it. That creature evolved to survive conditions we can't understand." He adjusted his glasses. "We probably just injured it enough to drive it away. Its gill structure would be sensitive to the mining slurry, but its resilience is impressive." I nodded, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Jack, I need a complete damage report." Jack tapped quickly at his console, his usual methodical pace replaced with urgent efficiency. He scrolled through several screens before looking up. "Structural integrity is holding at 76%. We've completely lost 5 drones, 8, 12, 14, 17, and 23. External manipulator arm 2 is completely inoperable. Hydraulic system ruptured when the creature crushed it. The good news is the hull itself remains secure. No breaches detected in any section." Relief filled me. We were damaged but stable. The habitat would hold. "Jeffrey," I called across the command center. "Contact surface headquarters. Tell them we need an emergency evacuation team. Full detail on the situation, including all sensor data from the encounter." Jeffrey nodded, already turning to his communications console. "On it, Chief." I pushed myself up from my chair, muscles stiff from the tension. "Everyone, listen up. We're going into evacuation protocol. Dana, I need you to secure all remaining operational drones and put them in standby mode. Eugene, make sure all research data is backed up and prepared for transfer." I turned to the others. "Jack, Kenny, Molly, run full diagnostics on all life support systems. Make sure we have redundancies in place for everything critical." The crew moved with renewed purpose. The immediate danger passed, but the gravity of our situation still apparent in their focused expressions and tense movements. "What about personal items?" Molly asked, already organizing her station. "Standard emergency protocol," I answered. 1 bag per person, essentials only. We'll be leaving most equipment behind for the recovery team." As the crew dispersed to begin preparations, I sat back down at my console and pulled up the emergency protocols. We needed to organize shift rotations to ensure constant monitoring during our wait for rescue. It could be days before an evacuation team reached us at this depth. I began creating the schedule, assigning myself the longest shifts. I knew sleep would be impossible anyway, with the memory of that creature still fresh in my mind. An hour later, as we continued our preparations, a loud metallic groan echoed through the habitat. Everyone froze. Kathleen, who had been helping Eugene back up research data, dropped a tablet with a clatter. We all held our breath, listening for any sign that the creature had returned. After 30 seconds of silence, people returned to their tasks, but the brief panic showed how tense we were. We jumped at every creak and groan of the damaged habitat. We knew these were normal sounds from a structure settling after damage, but fear took over each time. I focused on finalizing the monitoring rotation schedule, keeping my hand steady on the console. We had survived, but our sanctuary was just a fragile bubble of air and technology in a world ruled by creatures better suited to its harsh realities. Dana approached my station with a tablet showing the status of our remaining drones. As she handed it to me, I noticed her hands were shaking slightly too. "All functional drones are secured and in standby mode," she reported. "Ready for evacuation procedures." "Good work," I said, taking the tablet. Another creak sounded from somewhere in the eastern section of the habitat. This time we both tensed but tried to hide it from each other. We were professionals after all. But as I looked around at my crew preparing for evacuation, I saw the same tightly controlled fear in every face. I gathered the crew in the command center, the habitat's emergency lights casting a subdued red glow across their worried faces. The attack had left us all shaken, but we needed to focus on survival now. Everyone needs to understand their evacuation assignments, I said, pulling up the protocol diagram on the main screen. When the rescue team arrives, we'll have limited time to transfer to their vessels. I walked them through the procedure, making sure each person knew their responsibility. Dana would supervise the transfer of critical operational data. Eugene was tasked with securing research samples. Jack, Kenny, and Molly would manage the final systems shutdown. Jeffrey would maintain communication with the rescue team, while Kathleen and Tucker would assist with medical supplies and emergency gear. Questions? I asked when I'd finished. Fern raised her hand. What about habitat re-entry? Should we prepare for the possibility of returning to complete the mission? I shook my head. Corporate will make that determination after assessing the damage. Our focus now is getting everyone out safely. After the briefing, I assigned monitoring shifts. We needed someone watching the systems at all times in case the creature returned or our structural problems worsened. I took the first 8-hour stretch myself, sending the others to rest. 36 hours dragged by. The habitat groaned as the pressure tested our weakened structure, each noise making us tense. We imagined the return of the armored predator that had nearly killed us all. Jeffrey's voice broke through the tense silence of the common area where most of us had gathered, unable to truly rest, despite exhaustion. I just received word from headquarters, he announced, holding his communication tablet. They've dispatched 2 rescue submersibles. ETA is approximately 36 hours from now. A collective breath of relief swept through the room. How many personnel can each sub accommodate? Jack asked. Each vessel can take 6 passengers plus crew, Jeffrey answered. More than enough for all of us. Dana stood up from where she'd been sitting. What about our equipment? The drones alone represent millions in investment. Personnel first, I reminded her. Equipment second. We'll salvage what we can within the time constraints. The news of rescue should have lifted spirits. But as the hours passed, the close quarters and stress wore on everyone. Small irritations turned into tension. Conversations became short, and people moved around each other awkwardly. I noticed Eugene and Molly in the main corridor, their voices carrying as I approached. What had started as a discussion about equipment protocols had escalated into something much more heated. You can't just power down the harvesting systems without flushing the intake filters, Eugene said, his face flushed with anger. Those mineral samples are irreplaceable. Molly stood with her arms crossed, her posture rigid. The safety protocols specifically state that in emergency situations we prioritize core system shutdown. The filters are secondary. Those secondary systems contain 6 weeks of research data. Eugene shot back, slapping his hand against the wall panel. But I wouldn't expect you to understand the scientific value when all you care about is checking boxes on your maintenance list. Are you questioning my professional judgment? Molly's voice rose sharply. I've been working these systems for 8 years while you've been playing in the mud with your precious rocks. Their argument was drawing attention from others. Dana had appeared at the far end of the corridor, watching with concern. This kind of fracturing was exactly what we couldn't afford right now. I stepped between them, keeping my voice measured but firm. That's enough, both of you. They continued glaring at each other over my shoulders. Eugene, I said, turning to him first. Molly is following standard emergency protocols. Those protocols exist for a reason. Before he could protest, I turned to Molly. However, Eugene's concern about the research data is valid. Is there a compromise that preserves both safety and data integrity? Molly took a deep breath, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. We could run a partial filter flush before shutdown. It would preserve most samples while still following safety guidelines. Eugene nodded reluctantly. I can work with that. Good, I said. Remember, we're all under extreme stress, but we need to function as a team for another day and a half. Channel that tension into getting us home safely. They separated without further argument, though the atmosphere remained charged. These kinds of conflicts would only increase the longer we were trapped here, waiting for rescue with the memory of the creature's attack fresh in our minds. That night, I sat alone in the command center during my shift. The habitat systems hummed around me. The structural integrity display showed 76%, stable, but concerning. At 3:15 in the morning, a soft alert tone drew my attention to the sensor panel. The vibration monitors were showing unusual patterns in the water surrounding our habitat. I leaned forward, studying the readings more carefully. They weren't strong enough to be seismic activity, but they were definitely abnormal. I switched to the external camera feeds and increased the sensitivity settings, pushing them to maximum gain. The screens showed nothing but the murky darkness beyond our external lights, which we'd kept at minimum power to avoid attracting attention. For 20 minutes, I scanned every angle, adjusting camera positions and light levels slightly to get better visibility. The vibrations continued at irregular intervals, almost like pulses moving around the habitat's perimeter. Then, as suddenly as they had begun, they stopped. I ran a diagnostic on the sensor array, thinking it might have been a system glitch, but everything checked out. The readings had been real. When Kenny arrived to relieve me at 4 in the morning, I was still pondering those mysterious vibrations. "Anything to report?" he asked, settling into the chair beside me. I gestured to the sensor logs on my screen. "We had some unusual vibrations about 45 minutes ago. Lasted about 20 minutes, then stopped. I couldn't see anything on the cameras." Kenny leaned in, examining the pattern. Could be aftershocks from that seismic activity we detected before the creature appeared. This region has always been geologically active." "Maybe," I said, not entirely convinced. But the pattern seemed too regular for natural seismic behavior, almost rhythmic. Kenny shrugged. "Water currents can create weird feedback in the sensors sometimes. I'll keep an eye out for any recurrence." I nodded and stood, suddenly aware of how tired I was. "Wake me immediately if they return, or if anything changes." "Will do, Chief," Kenny said, already settling in for his shift. I made my way to my quarters, but despite my exhaustion, sleep wouldn't come. I lay in my narrow bunk, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying those sensor readings over and over. The vibrations had seemed to circle the habitat, moving in a pattern that felt deliberate rather than random. What if the Dunkleosteus was still out there? What if it wasn't aftershocks or currents, but something circling our habitat, just beyond our cameras? Something watching and learning from our last encounter. I remembered how the creature had tested our structure, finding the weak points with an intelligence that seemed impossible for a prehistoric fish. The thought of it out there, watching us, planning its next move, made me shiver. The rescue submersibles couldn't arrive soon enough. I had the unsettling feeling that our ancient visitor wasn't finished with us yet. The blaring alarm yanked me from sleep like a physical force. I bolted upright in my bunk, heart racing as the harsh sound filled my small quarters. For a split second, I struggled to place myself. Then reality crashed in. We were 11,000 feet below the ocean's surface in a damaged habitat, waiting for rescue, and something was wrong. I grabbed my boots and shoved them on, not bothering with socks. The alarm continued its relentless wail as I stumbled out into the corridor, now bathed in pulsing red emergency light. Other crew members were emerging from their quarters, faces tight with renewed fear. The door to the command center hissed open as I rushed in. Dana was already at her station, fingers flying across her console, her face ghostly in the glow of the monitors. "What's happening?" I called out, crossing to my station. Dana looked up, her eyes wide. Multiple proximity alerts triggered simultaneously. The sensors picked up 4 large masses approaching from the southeast quadrant. I felt cold wash through me as I reached my console. "Show me." Dana tapped a command, and the main screen flickered to life with feed from our external cameras. The murky water outside was illuminated by our remaining external lights, and what I saw made my mouth go dry. It was back. The massive Dunkleosteus that had attacked us before. But this time, it wasn't alone. 3 smaller yet unmistakably similar creatures swam in formation around it. They shared the same prehistoric armor plating, the same massive jaw structure, though each was perhaps 2/3 the size of our original attacker. Tucker hurried to his station, glasses slightly askew. He stared at the screen, then quickly pulled up reference data on his tablet. "They belong to the same species," he said, his concern evident. "Based on their size and behavior, this seems to be a family unit. It's unprecedented. We thought these creatures were solitary hunters." I watched as the 3 smaller Dunkleosteuses circled our habitat with obvious purpose. The largest one, the one we'd encountered before, hung back slightly. I could see dark patches on its gill areas and mouth where our mining slurry had burned it. It moved with more caution now, but no less determination. "Everyone, prepare for impact," I ordered, my voice cutting through the alarm. I hit the switch to silence the blaring, leaving only the pulsing red lights. "Jack, what's our current structural integrity?" "Still at 76%, Jack called from his monitoring station. "But we can't take much more punishment on the connecting tunnels." The creatures continued their circling pattern, and I realized they weren't just swimming randomly. They were examining us, studying the habitat's structure. The injured leader kept its distance, watching. Suddenly, one of the smaller Dunkleosteuses broke from its pattern. It accelerated with shocking speed toward the east module, ramming into it with enough force to send tremors through the entire habitat. Equipment rattled on consoles, and Kathleen stumbled, catching herself on the edge of her workstation. Before I could even call out for a damage report, another impact rocked us from the opposite side. The second creature had struck the west module with equal force. These weren't random attacks. They came almost simultaneously from opposite sides. "They're coordinating," I said, the realization hitting me as hard as the creatures had hit our habitat. "They're attacking strategically." "That's impossible," Eugene said from behind me. "These are prehistoric fish. They can't." A third impact cut him off as the habitat groaned under the stress. "Structural integrity at 72%, Jack reported, his voice tight. East and west modules showing strain at the connection points. I watched the main screen with alarm. The largest Dunkleosteus circled at a distance, directing the others. After each impact, the smaller ones retreated to its position before moving in for another strike. "It's like they're taking commands," Dana whispered beside me. "Or the big one is teaching them how to hunt," Tucker said. "Many predator species teach their young how to hunt. We've never observed Dunkleosteus family dynamics before." Another coordinated hit rocked the habitat. I gripped my console to stay upright. "We need a new strategy," I said. The mining slurry worked last time, but we used most of it in that discharge. What's our remaining supply? Dana checked her readouts. Less than 20% capacity in the discharge tanks. Not enough for a sustained defense against 4 attackers. The gravity of our situation sank in. We had repelled 1 creature before, but now we faced 4, and they were working together. The rescue submersibles were still hours away, and our habitat was taking damage with each calculated strike. Molly stepped forward from her engineering station, tablet in hand. What about the emergency thrusters? I turned to her. The stabilizers? Those are meant for correcting our position during current shifts. She nodded. Yes, but they can generate enough force to move the habitat a few meters. Not far. But it might disrupt their attack pattern. The sudden movement could confuse them. Most deep-sea predators aren't used to prey that can change position. I thought about her suggestion. The emergency thrusters were meant to stop the habitat from being pulled by strong underwater currents. Using them to dodge wasn't in any protocol I knew, but this situation was beyond protocol. Would the structure handle the stress of the thrusters after the damage we've already taken? I asked. Jack ran a quick calculation on his console. If we limit to 30% thrust capacity, yes. Beyond that, I can't guarantee the connecting tunnels will hold. Another coordinated impact shook us, this time both creatures hitting the same spot in sequence. Warning lights flashed across my console. Structural integrity at 69%, Jack reported grimly. We don't have many options left, I said, looking at Molly. Let's do it. Prepare the emergency thrusters for a controlled burst. Dana, give me manual control of the system. As my crew scrambled to carry out my orders, I watched the screen where the 4 prehistoric creatures continued their methodical assault on our underwater home. We had survived one encounter with these living fossils by luck and quick thinking. Now we needed to do it again, with the odds stacked even higher against us. I activated the emergency thrusters. The habitat lurched beneath me, metal groaning as the massive structure inched through the water. My stomach dropped with the sudden movement, but I kept my eyes locked on the main screen, watching as the smaller Dunkleosteus scattered. Their armored bodies darted away from our lights, momentarily confused by our unexpected motion. It worked, Dana said, her voice tight with relief. I nodded, not taking my eyes off the monitor. For now. The habitat stopped shaking as the thrusters powered down. I checked the structural integrity display. 69%. Not good, but we were still holding. The command center was lit by emergency lights, highlighting everyone's faces. Jack looked up from his station, his expression grim. Just got confirmation from topside. Rescue submersibles are still 6 hours out. 6 hours. The words hung in the air between us. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling sweat despite the cool temperature of the habitat. Can we hold that long? Kathleen asked from behind me, saying what everyone was thinking. Before I could answer, Dana pointed at the screen. Look, the big one's coming back. The largest Dunkleosteus had recovered from its surprise. It circled back toward us, swimming in a slow, calculated pattern around the habitat. Its massive armored head swung from side to side, examining our structure with a focused gaze. It's studying us, I said quietly. Tucker nodded and adjusted his glasses. Adaptive behavior, surprising for a species we thought relied only on instinct. I watched the creature's movements and noticed something strange. It's avoiding the discharge port. Each time the Dunkleosteus circled near where we released the mining slurry, it veered away, creating an uneven patrol pattern. Makes sense, Tucker said. The slurry damaged its respiratory system. It's avoiding what hurt it. Eugene stood up suddenly from his monitoring station. We have one manipulator arm still functioning, the starboard unit. The hydraulics are damaged but operational. I turned to look at him, an idea taking shape. How operational? Eugene tapped at his screen. 43% capacity, enough for basic movement and grip function. I thought quickly, mentally cataloging our options. 6 hours was a long time to hold out against these creatures, especially if they kept attacking in coordinated waves. But if they were avoiding the slurry... Do we have any mining slurry left in the reserves? I asked. Dana checked her systems. Minimal amounts. Less than 20 liters in the secondary tank. Not enough for another full discharge. We don't need a full discharge, I said, the plan crystallizing. Eugene, get a sample container from the lab, one of the large reinforced canisters. Fill it with whatever slurry we have left. Eugene nodded and moved toward the exit. I turned to Dana. I need you to reroute auxiliary power to the manipulator arm. Override the safety protocols and maximize hydraulic pressure. We need every bit of strength we can get, even if it burns out the system. Dana's fingers moved across her console. You want to create a weapon? Exactly, I said, watching the screen as another of the smaller Dunkleostuses made a testing pass at our east wing. The habitat shuddered slightly at the impact. We're going to use the arm to break the container against them if they get too close. Jack looked dubious. That arm wasn't designed for that kind of precision movement, especially at reduced capacity. I know, I said, moving to the manipulator control station. I'll operate it manually. Eugene came back with the canister filled with the dark slurry. The toxic mining byproduct had worked against the creatures before. I hoped it would be even more effective on the smaller ones. Dana finished her modifications, looking up at me. Power rerouted. You've got about 58% function now, but the hydraulics will overheat if pushed too hard. I nodded, taking the control seat. The manual interface lit up, showing the arm's position outside the habitat. Let's test it. I moved the joystick, watching on the monitor as the massive mechanical arm responded. Its movements were sluggish, but functional. The grip mechanism closed around the canister that Eugene had secured to the loading dock, lifting it with visible strain. Hydraulic pressure holding, Dana reported. But I'm seeing temperature spikes. We won't get many attempts at this, I said, raising the arm. The canister of slurry dangled from its grip, a makeshift weapon against prehistoric predators. We didn't have to wait long. The large Dunkleosteus had completed several circuits of our habitat and seemed to be directing the smaller ones. One of them broke formation, accelerating toward our most vulnerable point, the connecting tunnel that had already sustained damage. Incoming, Jack called out. Structural integrity can't take another direct hit to that section. I tightened my grip on the controls, timing the creature's approach. The manipulator arm was slow, and I'd get only one chance. The Dunkleosteus moved with frightening speed, its armored head aimed at the tunnel like a battering ram. Wait for it, Tucker said urgently. You need to hit the gill area. I watched, calculating, feeling sweat bead on my forehead. The creature was 20 feet away. 15, 10. I swung the arm. The servos whined in protest as the manipulator swept forward. For a terrible moment, I thought I'd misjudged, but then the canister smashed against the side of the Dunkleosteus, rupturing on impact. Dark slurry exploded outward, enveloping the creature's head and flowing into its gill slits. The effect was immediate and violent. The Dunkleosteus convulsed, its massive body thrashing in the water. The monitor showed it rolling and twisting, trying to escape the cloud of toxic material that now clung to its most sensitive respiratory tissues. After several seconds of frenzied movement, it turned and shot away into the darkness. It worked, Kathleen exclaimed. On the screen, the other Dunkleostuses, including the large leader, had pulled back. They maintained a perimeter around our habitat, but kept a noticeably greater distance. "They're learning," Tucker said, his voice steady. "They recognize the threat now." I tried to move the manipulator arm back to its resting position, but the control panel sparked. A warning alarm sounded from Dana's station. "Hydraulic system failure," she reported. "The arm's fried." I released the controls, watching as the manipulator hung limp outside the habitat. Its purpose served. "That's it. We're out of weapons." The command center fell silent as we all stared at the monitor. The Dunkleostuses maintained their distance, circling but not approaching. For now. "How much time did we buy?" Jack asked. I checked the chronometer. "If we're lucky enough, 6 hours until rescue arrives." I looked at the dead manipulator arm on the screen. We gave ourselves a chance at least. 2 hours until rescue arrives, Jeffrey announced from the communications console, his voice carrying a note of relief that matched the collective exhale from the crew around me. I allowed myself the briefest moment of hope. 2 hours. We just needed to hold out for... The floor bucked beneath my feet with such force that I was airborne for a split second before crashing down hard onto the metal grating. The impact knocked the wind from my lungs as the habitat groaned around us like a dying beast. "What the hell was that?" Dana shouted from somewhere to my left. Before I could respond, every screen and light in the command center went black. For 3 seconds, we were in complete darkness, 11,000 feet below the ocean. Then the emergency systems kicked in, filling the space with a red glow that illuminated the frightened faces of my crew. "It hit us from underneath," Jack said, already at the damage assessment panel. "Never attacked from that vector before." I pulled myself to my feet using the edge of the console. "Structural integrity?" Jack's face, illuminated by the crimson emergency lights, told me everything before he even spoke. 58% and dropping. The impact damaged the main power coupling. We're running on backup systems only. I made the decision instantly. "Everyone suit up in emergency pressure gear. Now." I pointed to the lockers at the rear of the command center. "If the hull breaches, those suits are all that stands between you and 11,000 feet of crushing pressure." The crew scrambled toward the lockers. I caught Tucker's eye as he passed me. "It's learning," he said quietly. "Attacking our blind spot." On the remaining functional monitor, I saw the massive Dunkleosteus circling back around. The creature had recovered from our last defense and had brought its family unit back for another assault. The way it moved, purposeful, calculated, sent a chill through me. "We have no weapons left," Dana said, pulling a pressure suit from a locker. "No slurry, manipulator arms gone. What's the plan?" I stared at the monitor, watching the prehistoric predator circle back for another strike. My mind raced through our dwindling options, until I landed on one I had hoped never to consider. "The self-destruct protocol," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Eugene froze halfway into his pressure suit. "Are you serious?" "The system was installed to prevent corporate espionage if we had to abandon the station," I explained, moving to the main console. "The explosive charges are positioned throughout the habitat's infrastructure. When triggered, they'll create a massive shockwave." "You want to blow up our home?" Molly asked, her voice small. "I can set it to detonate after we're safely aboard the rescue submarines," I said. 2 hours gives us enough time. It's the only way to stop these creatures." Kathleen nodded grimly. "If they destroy the habitat while we're still here." "Exactly," I said. "Jack, Help everyone into their suits. Make sure all seals are tight. I turned to the secure terminal embedded in my command station. I need to access the protocol manually. While Jack showed the others how to suit up, I entered my authorization code into the terminal. A keypad slid out from the console, an analog failsafe that couldn't be hacked remotely. The system needed a 16-digit code, followed by several confirmation steps. I typed the first sequence. The system had multiple redundancies. I needed to override 3 safety protocols before the countdown would start. "How's everyone doing with those suits?" I called over my shoulder. "Almost ready," Jack responded, checking the seal on Dana's helmet before moving to help Fern. The habitat suddenly lurched to the side, throwing several crew members off balance. The impact was even more violent than the first, metal screaming as it stressed beyond tolerances. A high-pitched hissing sound cut through the air, the unmistakable sound of water under extreme pressure finding its way inside. "We've got a breach," Jack shouted, pointing to a hairline fracture that had appeared on the curved wall of the command module. A fine mist was spraying into the room, the water pressure so high it looked almost like steam. "Everyone finish suiting up now," I ordered, turning back to the terminal to continue the sequence. My fingers worked quickly as water began to pool on the floor beneath the console. The emergency lights flickered as another system failed in the habitat. I heard metal groan and the structure creak as it struggled to hold together under the pressure. The communication system crackled to life. "Abyssal Minor 6, this is Rescue Sub-Alpha. We have visual contact. Repeat, we have visual contact. ETA 12 minutes to docking." Jeffrey, now fully suited except for his helmet, rushed to the communications array. "Rescue Sub-Alpha, this is Abyssal Minor 6. Be advised we are under attack by marine life and have multiple hull breaches. Emergency evacuation required." I finished entering the third override sequence, and a countdown appeared on the small terminal screen. 45 minutes until detonation. Through the external cameras, I could see all 4 Dunkleosteus gathering in formation. The largest one was in front, its massive armored head pointing directly at our most vulnerable section. They were coordinating for what would surely be their final, devastating attack. One our weakened structure couldn't possibly withstand. Water was now ankle-deep in the command center, the spray from the fracture growing stronger as the structural integrity continued to deteriorate. I sealed the self-destruct sequence with a final command code, locking it from any potential override. The countdown was now irreversible. "Self-destruct protocol engaged," I announced, turning to face my crew. They stood in their pressure suits, faces visible through their helmet visors, a mixture of fear and determination reflected in their eyes. "The rescue subs are 12 minutes out. We need to get to the docking bay immediately. Move."